Welcome everyone to BRAINCAST. This is Pospo for Mostly Learning, right in the beginning of a new week and a new month. Monday, the 1st of February. As Nina Simone would have said, it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. But that was pre-lockdown, of course, as now, to be honest, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. In any case, I hope you're all feeling good out there. Last week, Professor Sarah Byford allowed us into the fascinating world of an unexpected ally, health economics, and how we can put them in good use to improve mental health around the world. This week, we go all Olivia Newton-John as we get physical. I'm not talking about the appalling distinction between organic and non-organic. I'm talking about physical exercise. So get your dumbbells and yoga mats out. With me, the head of physiotherapy at South London Maudsley and an NIHR clinical lecturer in the Department of Psychological Medicine at King's College London. With over hundreds, I think like 500 publications around physical activity and mental health, he is one of the most highly cited researchers in the field of psychology and psychiatry. And to be honest, that explains in part why he's been featured in the New York Times, Time Magazine, Forbes, CNN, Women's Health, BBC News. But you know what? He wasn't happy. There was something missing, and that was BRAINCAST. BRAINCAST people, this is Dr. Brandon Stubbs. Brandon, welcome to BRAINCAST.
Thank you so much, Pospo. Absolutely delighted to be on BRAINCAST. Really making my Monday special.
So, Brandon, in a totally biased and unapologetic manner, I will start by citing a slightly more well-known Greek than myself, Thales of Miletus, one of the greatest philosophers who, something like 2,000 years ago, when he was asked, who is happy? He replied, «Ο το μεν σώμα υγιής, τη δε ψυχήν εύπορος, τη δε φύσιν ευπέδευτος», which roughly translates to who that has a healthy body, a rich soul, and is well-natured. So why did we not listen?
Well, it's a great point, and there's been numerous philosophers, BC and more recently, who've said that healthy body, healthy mind is essential, and movement is essential for our vitality. And we've seen this great transition in time where, throughout the course of history, we've been through hunter-gatherers to, manual work where we've had to go out and do lots of movement, to doing what I often do now, which is sitting on a desk or sitting down and not moving around all the time. I'm seeing this huge sort of societal shift over time in the way that we do and the way that we move, and people moving less and less and less. And we know there's many reasons for this, but also that physical activity, not moving around, is not good for our physical health and our mental health, and we know those are core and interlinked with each other.
Now, fast forward around 2,000 years, and in 1985, Dr. Taylor from Stanford University, he wrote about the relation of physical activity and exercise to mental health. One of the most cited papers in the field. So he talked about, alleviating depression, helping people out of addictions, and even improving IQ in learning disability, which, all sounds great. But how does it do that? How does physical exercise improve your mental health?
Sure. Well, it's a great source of frustration for many of us, just to pick up on your point that it's taken so long for the field of science, around physical exercise to be taken seriously, for both the promotion of mental health and the treatment of mental health conditions. And, I feel like we're really starting to get some good traction from some really good evidence now, which is fantastic. The reasons and the mechanisms why physical activity and different types of exercise improve our mental and cognitive health. I could give you a short and a long answer. The short answer is we probably don't know there's many different mechanisms which contribute to it, and anybody who says it is due to theory X or theory Y is more well read than I am. The longer answer, which I'll try and keep short and you'll be thankful for, is that it's likely due to a combination, like many things, of underpinning neurobiological mechanisms. So for instance, we've demonstrated that over a period of time you can get increases in hippocampal volume. We know how important this is for memory, concentration, cognition, and is altered in many cognitive and mental conditions as well. We've also shown that you can reduce inflammation, and we all know how important inflammation is for our physical health, stress, and also mental health as well, and also reduce cortisol and increase BDNF, the brain fertilizer, which can increase neuronal across the brain. So a number of neurobiological methods go on about as well, but it's really important that we engage and neglect the social benefits, which is a bit tricky now in the current times that we're in. I mean, we all feel good, particularly when we take part in team sports, or go for a walk or a run with a friend, or play a game of tennis, or do something. And even in not that context, if you go out for a run, or you go to the gym, or you do a class, or you go for a walk, there's a sense of achievement and that you've felt that you've done something. You feel like you've improved your self-efficacy, you feel good about yourself, you've achieved a goal, and it's probably a combination of all of these different factors that come together to make us feel good when we engage in exercise.
But let's take a step back and see what we define as physical exercise, so that we're all on the same page, because I'm pretty sure everyone has a different idea of what exercise or what physical activity means. So can you tell us?
Sure, absolutely. So around the same time as the reference you made earlier, there was a very famous and highly cited definition of what is physical activity and what is exercise by Kasperson and colleagues. And essentially, physical activity is any bodily movement which increases energy expenditure. That could be moving around the house, that could be picking up a cup, that could be going for a walk, that could be dancing. And physical activity and movement is good for us. And all of the time we're talking about just the magic of movement. Moving is really good for us. Exercise is a subset of physical activity where we specifically go out with the intention to improve our fitness. So that could be, for instance, doing a yoga class, a Pilates class, going to the gym and doing some weights, for instance, playing a team sport. And that is a definition of exercise where we're doing a subset of physical activity with a specific aim of improving our fitness. So it's really, really important, because exercise can have negative connotations to people, particularly if you've not had experiences, say, for instance, at school, physical education classes. Just the exercise from speaking to people puts people off. We're very much saying that, this is about finding a movement that you enjoy, whether it be dancing, Tai Chi, yoga, Pilates, running. Find the movement you enjoy and go and do it, and then you're much more likely to continue doing it. Don't be put off by the word exercise.
Well, in 2018, though, Sami Chekroot analyzed data from 1.2 million adults in the USA. So published in the Lancet Psychiatry, his team showed that individuals who exercised had fewer days of poor mental health in the past month than individuals who did not exercise. However, this was true for individuals who exercised for between 30 to 60 minutes a time, around 3 to 5 times per week. Because if they exercised harder, then the picture changed, according to him. Essentially, they said that exercising beyond 6 hours per week is associated with worse mental health. But that doesn't sound right, does it?
Sure. So I'll caveat it with just 2 points before I address that paper, which I know very well. So the World Health Organization have recently recommended that all of us do up to 300 minutes of moderate and vigorous physical activity over the course of the week, and at least 10 minutes bouts, and including 2 times where you push your muscles against resistance. So that should be what we're aiming for. And these are aspirational targets for many of us, and it's not to be put off and think, oh my gosh, I'm hardly doing anything. It's recognizing that people who have a physical health condition, caring responsibilities, or any reason, just getting started is really important for your physical and mental health. That would be the first point I would make. And then get actually onto the paper specifically, which I will address. So this paper was for the field. However, there were some limitations with the design, and we had some correspondence with the authors in the journal. So it was a cross-sectional study. So they looked at self-reported amounts of physical activity and exercise over a set period of time, and self-reported mental health symptoms. So we can't be sure of what direction a relationship's going. So is it people who are more depressed, are exercising more, and vice versa? So we can't be sure. If we, for instance, looked at, say, antidepressant medication or CBT, you probably would find in a cross-sectional relationship that those who were most depressed or most anxious, had worse mental health symptoms, were having higher frequency of CBT and maybe taking a higher dose of antidepressant medication. Of course you would if you cross-sectionally. So you could wrongly conclude that this dose is too much and is making these people worse if you inferred causality when you're looking at a cross-sectional study. And of course, that would be a wrong conclusion to make. So the same, logic was applied to exercise. So people who were doing lots of exercise may, in theory, have been doing this to manage their mental health symptoms. We infer causality from that study, saying that exercise was causing this worse mental health symptoms. So I think there are a number of issues with that. And the other point, which I forgot as I was rambling on, was that there is a small subset of people that we are worried about over-exercising for, and we're increasingly recognizing this. Obviously, it's the core feature of people in the age that we live now, and Instagram and posting pictures, where there is a newer concept of exercise sort of addiction, where people obsessively feel the compulsion and need to exercise and go above and beyond the recommended limits. But we can really recommend the health benefits up to 300 minutes over the course of the week.
Fantastic. I'm glad we got this out of the way, because it seems that once you start exercising, the benefits just keep on flooding in, regardless of age. In a review and meta-analysis by Alves Donato, published a couple of weeks ago in the Journal of Affective Disorders, they showed that better cardiorespiratory fitness was linked with better mood in children and adolescents. And even when you look later in life, for example, Danielle Loring, back in 2001, she looked into a large sample of Canadians, something like 9,000 people, and found that physical activity was associated with lower risks of dementia of any time. So sounds like we need to be exercising all our lives. So it's not like, okay, I'm going to go and do yoga for a week and then goodbye depression and dementia. It's not a one-off. It's not a quick fix. It's a life choice, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's a life choice. We're here to move, and movement should be enjoyable. This is not something which is meant to be really difficult, torturous. Some people really enjoy the challenge of, say, a high intensity interval training class. Very much the message that I communicate is it's self-selected. Do something, a movement which you enjoy. You're more likely to find pleasurable, and it's more likely to be maintained in the long term. Because what we don't want people doing, whether they be younger adolescents or people later on, is just doing a bout of movement or exercise for a short period of time, really just as much as improving our eating and nutrition. You had an excellent session recently with Professor Felice Jacka. Good nutrition, good movement should be something that we're trying across the course of our lives, and that may change over time as well as we set ourselves new targets. And there is really good evidence, whether you are younger age, middle age or older age, it's never too early to start and it's never too late to start to experience the mental, cognitive and physical health benefits from movement.
A life choice, though, that for some it's not that easy to take. So what are the obstacles or difficulties, if you like, that people with severe mental illness face in being more active?
Sure, it's a great point. And I don't want to say that come across that physical activity is a cure-all for any particular type of mental illness. Very much it's an adjunctive, helpful component for all of us, and particularly those with mental health conditions. And all of the physical comorbidities in the cohort that you mentioned there. So people with severe mental illness, as we know, often have many physical health comorbidities, and outside of this context and in the context of people with severe mental illness, exercise and movement has been shown to improve mental health and physical health as well. However, there are numerous really important barriers that we can't neglect. Core parts of the mental illness, such as decreased motivation, the negative symptoms that people may experience, socioeconomic inequalities make it more difficult to access, for instance, leisure facilities, other groups. Some of the stigma that this group may also commonly experience may make it more difficult to join groups of exercise. So there's lots of different barriers that this population can experience that make it increasingly difficult for them to engage in exercise. But there is good evidence that we can engage this population, and when they are engaged, they can experience good positive benefits.
And actually, this brings us to our next point, because reduced physical activity has been highlighted as one of the main reasons why people with serious mental illness are at risk of dying 10 to 20 years earlier than people without a severe mental illness. But as you highlighted, there may be a way of changing that. So now you authored the European Psychiatry Association's guidance on physical activity as treatment for severe mental illness. So tell me more.
Sure. So there's been a huge increase in interest in physical health more broadly over the last 10 years, recognizing that there is this, grotesque inequality in life expectancy for people with severe mental illness, and increasing amount of research showing that, up to 70% of this is due to physical health conditions and socioeconomic inequalities. And outside of this, there's lots of evidence to show that helping people live physically active lives can help reduce some of the common reasons why people with severe mental illness die early. And there's been lots of research over the last 10 years, particularly looking at the evidence base of physical activity and exercise in severe mental illness. So a core group of people with lived experience, people, psychiatrists, general practitioners, physiotherapists, sports psychologists, and several others all got together to say, what does the current state of evidence say around how good is physical activity and exercise for people with severe mental illness to improve all types of outcomes, and what should we do going forwards? And we looked at severe mental illness, including people with major depressive disorder, people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder too. And essentially what we found very briefly is there's very good evidence that physical activity can be useful to help contribute at a population level to reduce the risk of developing depression, and be useful as an adjunctive treatment for people with mild to moderate depressive symptoms. There's also good evidence that exercise, particularly when it is overseen by a recognised exercise professional, that it can improve people with schizophrenia's mental health and physical health too, some of those physical health issues which we're really worried about. And within bipolar disorder, surprisingly, there's a real dearth and small amount of evidence which looked at the impact of exercise in this population. So there's really much more to be done. But the overarching aim is really to say that we need to move exercise and physical activity as a sort of nice to have, as the whole person care, to being a core part of what we offer within services and recommendations to people, and there's good evidence to back that up.
But Brendan, it's not a one size fits all. Alongside Dr. Simon Rosenbaum, you authored a book called Exercise-Based Interventions for Mental Health Illness, which apparently is the first evidence-based book on how exercise can be used to improve people's mental health. Now, flicking through the pages, I can't help but notice the different chapters, for all the various different mental disorders. So bipolar disorder, physical activity, schizophrenia and exercise, exercise for treatment of alcohol use disorders. Now, essentially, you're suggesting that each disorder has different physical activity requirements. Is that right?
So I think there's what I would like to say is this was a textbook to bring together all of the experts from different areas. So within different mental health and substance use disorder conditions, we've been working separately in silos, and there are unique barriers for some of these individual conditions which you mentioned, people with eating disorders, people with schizophrenia, alcohol use disorders. Clearly there are there is some overlap between those conditions, but there is some differences in terms of barriers and motivating factors to engage this population. This is a textbook aimed at people who do not know a lot about these particular conditions. So each chapter within the book, whether it be alcohol use disorders, post-traumatic and stress-related disorders, is really to provide some background on what is the sort of commonality around this condition, what are some of the barriers and facilitators this population may experience, and how could exercise be used in this population, and what is the current evidence base, and what would a good approach look like for this particular population. So it's a summary of the evidence, and then saying this is what good physical activity could look like. But broadly speaking, the exercise interventions are quite similar, but acknowledging the important differences in barriers and facilitators that each population may experience.
And while we are here praising the undeniable benefits of physical exercise, there have been occasions, though, when exercise as treatment has stirred a bit of controversy. And it was only recently that NICE guidelines, so for people not familiar, NICE stands for National Institute for Healthcare and Excellence, they withdrew graded exercise therapy from the recommended treatment for chronic fatigue. And I have to say, I wasn't expecting that. So what happened?
So I haven't been involved in the NICE guidelines. This is an area which I'm not involved in clinically. And my understanding is that very much this is in the process of a consultation going forwards. I know that there's been a number of large, well-powered, randomized controlled trials, and the results of those freely available. And I know there's been numerous rebuttals against the research process, but the actual original randomized controlled trials, from what I've read, seem to suggest that exercise can be beneficial from people. I am aware of a paper of service evaluation, so naturalistic long-term study for people who meet the criteria for CFS, and over an 11-year period where people get graded activity therapy, where people are very much encouraged to track how much activity they're doing, avoid boom and bust cycles, gently increase their activity, rest lots, has shown positive benefits over a 12-year period in improving people's physical health, mental health, ability to get back to work. And this paper is under review at the moment. I'm not involved in that paper, but it was presented at an in-service training recently. But I'm aware that it's a controversial area, and for some people this has not been helpful. There's lots of anecdotal reports and surveys capturing people's experiences on that.
So, with such, robust evidence of the benefits of physical activity, it is expected, that some will, jump on the bandwagon, but not for all the good reasons. Now, the market size of the global fitness and health club industry has been steadily increasing, the recent years, exceeding $96 billion in 2019. So couple that with a $37 billion vitamin and supplement industry and the $14 billion functional and integrative medicine industry, and I can tell you that not all of these people have our best interests at heart. So how can we as professionals protect our patients and ourselves?
It's a great question, and you only need to go on to a social media platform such as Instagram or Facebook, and you will be inundated with social influencers, people who are not grounded in evidence base in this sort of area of lifestyle, who are recommending, program X, program Y, and saying this will really help you, but don't have the academic or scientific or clinical training to make recommendations on that particular program. So obviously it's an area where people in the general population are enormously interested in. It's really, really important that people who have scientific and clinical understanding of the benefits, the risks associated with physical activity and exercise come out and talk about the evidence and reach out to the general public and population also. and quash any of the sort of quackery which can come out to really stand up for evidence-based promotion of interventions for people.
And then Brandon, what would a braincast be without a mention of our beloved COVID? Now, here we all are, trapped inside four walls, stuck behind screens. Our lives, admittedly, have become, way more quiet, sedentary. And I do find interesting that, despite the strict regulations, one of the few things that we're still allowed to do is exercise. So any tips from the experts?
First of all, I'd like to say it's no coincidence that throughout lockdown here, exercise is the one thing we've been able to go and do, with the caveats that we go and do with our household. There is no coincidence that is what we're allowed to do. That just goes to show the gravitas and the kudos of how good exercise and movement is for our mental health, and how much it is appreciated in a current pandemic, that this is something we are able to go and do. So my key advice and tips for people, which I need to hear myself, are a couple of things really. Is that if you are indoors sitting and not moving, get up and move around. If you can, every 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, break up that sedentary behavior, just standing up, walking up and down, maybe doing 5 sit-to-stands. That can be really helpful to increase blood flow, break up the sedentary behavior and time also, but also really make priority for that time in the day when you can go out, particularly if it's daytime, if you can, to go out and just to be into nature and do an activity, whether that be a run, a more formal type of exercise, or just a walk, and make that a priority throughout your day. There's good evidence to suggest that will improve your cognitive function and also your mental health too.
And what about long COVID? I mean, as we all know, for some people, COVID can cause symptoms that last, weeks or months after the infection has gone. So is there any role for exercise in the treatment of long COVID, as far as you're aware?
Sure. Well, I can talk a little bit about my own clinical experience, which is confined to people with severe and enduring mental illness at the moment. Obviously, this is a group which has been disproportionately affected by acute COVID, and it seems also long COVID. So my experiences so far has been that this population that I've worked with have been very open to the idea of setting person-led goals and encouraging people to rest and increase activity gradually. So I think and people have responded really well to seeing what helps them, ensuring they have rest, and avoiding any of the boom and bust cycles. So what we don't want in long COVID and the people that I work with or people outside is to have a great day and all of a sudden think I can do what I was doing before and go and do an hour HIIT class or go and do a 10-kilometer run. That's what we want to do. And with people that I've been working with clinically, people have been responding really, quite favorably to that and finding it really helpful that someone is showing an interest in helping them to set their own goals and really encouraging them that they can increase their activity at their own pace and rest as needed. And hearing those words from me as a physiotherapist, that rest is good and important, is really helpful for those people. And outside of this context, we in long COVID more generally, we don't have any definitive evidence yet to say whether exercise or physical activity can help. I think it's a really important area to look at going forwards. What we certainly don't want to do is want to avoid lots of boom and bust, where people all of a sudden feel great and then go out and do a 10K run and all of a sudden have this huge crash. But thankfully, there is a lot of really, really good rehab experts who are running clinical trials. One is happening at the University of Warwick at the moment, where they're of expert overseen exercise and rest, guided by the individual, with lots of service user input to see if it can help improve people's outcomes. So I think we're going to have some of those answers in the near future. but we don't.
Last question. Last question, and you have 21 seconds. We're already running out of time. So I was reading a recent article by Laura Hemmings titled Experiences of Physiotherapy in Mental Health. And one of the barriers to care was the separation of mind and body. And actually one of the patients, and this is verbatim what they said, in the study, said that, they, meaning the physiotherapists, assume they have to fix your body and someone else is there to fix your brain. So is your work and research then, the final nail on the coffin for the mind-body dualism supporters?
Well, I'd recommend anybody go and read that paper, but I think that physiotherapists more broadly are uniquely placed to really help combine the mind and the body, particularly in mental health circumstances. We're predominantly trained in physical health and looking after physical health, but have mental health expertise. And I really hope that as a whole, we can help the rest of the team and the individual combine mind and body together.
Fantastic. BRAINCAST people, Dr. Brendan Stubbs. Thank you so much, Brendan. I do feel that your research is making a positive impact on people's lives and actually shows that the link between our brain and the rest of our body is way more than just our neck. So if you believe that too, then do yourself a favor and get Brendan's and Dr. Sam Rosenbaum's book, Exercise-Based Interventions for Mental Illness. That's, of course, if you can move. But what if you couldn't move? What if you were trapped within your own body? What if you were suffering from catatonia, that fascinating, debilitating, mysterious, and certainly challenging syndrome with equally challenging to pronounce symptoms like Gegenhalten, Mitgehen, and Mitmachen, which is, yes, you guessed right, the topic of our next BRAINCAST. With me, one of the undeniable experts in the field, Dr. Jonathan Rogers, all the way from UCL. Okay, it's not that far. So until then, Pospo and BRAINCAST for mostly learning, over and out.
Thank you all.